And it's one that's obviously close to many of our hearts, Zach, close to many of our hearts. And I want to start in an interesting place. You may spot me or may not spot me in the picture. But it's a story that's well told, well trodden, and a path that is still being trodden today. My parents left Gambia in West Africa in the early 1960s for one simple reason. It was a British colony. It was the smallest country in Africa at the time. Had decent primary education, but hardly any secondary and certainly no tertiary education. And many of you, your parents would have shared a similar journey. They were going to give up their middle-class lives in Gambia to come and give their kids a future based on the foundation of education. Mum and Dad came over with 3 kids, thinking that Dad would buy himself a property in London, get himself that decent job, and we'd all end up going to university and disappearing back to Gambia at some stage. It didn't quite turn out that way. London was by far the most expensive city on the planet at the time. The housing that was available to Dad was nowhere near the best. Consequently, the schooling that was available to the family was nowhere near the best. And normally, we know how the rest of the story goes. But sometimes adversity can build a drive and an opportunity that changes the game. Zach. I was lucky enough to get to university. I was lucky enough to get an MBE from the Queen for Services to Business in... I was lucky. Not everyone is lucky. Not everyone is anywhere near lucky. We need to change that game. So what we want to do today is we're going to tell the stories of 3 outstanding charities. I want you to give a warm welcome to my 3 guest panelists. Colleen, come and join me. Give her a big round of applause, please. Colleen. Dwain, come and join me. Give him a huge round of applause, please. And last but not least, Tony, come and join us, please. So look, this is our usual game of 2 halves. In the first half, I'm going to have a conversation with my esteemed guests to set the context for tonight. Bear with us. At the break, you'll have a chance to meet them personally, because part 2, it's your time. We want you to think about the questions you want to ask them. And let me frame our conversation appropriately. We're peering into the future. We want to help change the patterns, the life chances of a number of fantastic local young boys who, if without intervention, the likelihood they may not succeed. I think what my colleagues will share with us, with the right intervention, there are no limits anymore. So, with that in mind, Colleen, welcome.
Thank you.
Amos Bursary. Why? Where did it start? What was the catalyst?
My parents died together in 2008, and for a lot of our friends and for close families, they were inspirational parents. They believed in education, they believed in supporting communities, and they absolutely believed in the strength of people coming together. And when they passed away, my friend said, you need to do something to remember them. And we thought about what had been discussed in the family, and very much we talked a lot about young men and why young men were not achieving the success that they should do. And so as a result of that, we decided that what we would do is use the money that was raised instead of flowers at the funeral, and we would use that money to just provide bursaries to 5 students. And what we would do is just support those 5 students in 6th form. It was just going to be just one year.
Just once.
Yeah, initially it was just 1 year. We'd take 5 students, because what we have today is not what we started. It was just to support those 5 students over 5 years.
Honouring mother and father.
Absolutely.
In
And
memory
that
of
was
you, we're
going to
going
be
to
their
do
legacy.
this. And it's going to be a one-off.
A one-off. But what we found is that after we had been running with the 5 young men, so what we were doing was giving them support. We were giving them mentors. We were running workshops, little workshops for them. My friends were providing it. And the organisation that I was working with at the time had given us the space. So we started off with the 5, and after 3 months, parents were coming back and saying, don't know what you've done, but you've actually changed my son's life and you can't stop doing this. And the students themselves were saying, we have friends that we believe you need to support. So it was as a result of this that we sat down and decided, okay, we would extend it for another year. And from 5 students that we started off with in 2009, we now have 179 students on our books, of which 101 of them are Amos Bursary students, 35 of them are graduates, or our alumni, as we call them, and the rest of the students are associate students. So students
So to stop there, I'm going to come back to that. That's given us the start. Dwain.
Our story...
Reach. Where did it start and why?
Yeah, our story in Reach Society is similar, but different. Most of you here will have heard of the Reach Role Model Programme that came on the back of the Reach report published in 2007. The upshot of that report was that DCLG rolled out the Reach National Role Model Programme, which should have been going for 3 years. However, with the arrival of the coalition government in 2010, it fell down the pecking order. It was not seen by that government as a priority. I'm a fairly emotional sort of guy, and I felt that our community had received just one slap in the face too many. So I was quite mad. And I spoke to 2 of my friends who were involved in that programme, and they're in the audience now, Donald and Rob. And I asked a simple question. Were the work that you were doing with the other 18 role models making a difference to the boys and young men in our community? The answer was yes. But with that programme now ended, the question to us was, what should we do? Short answer, we felt it was our responsibility to inspire our young people. And so 6 months after the closure of that national programme, we started Reach Society. And at the core of Reach Society is taking responsibility for ourselves. And everything that we do is driven by that motivation behind a structured approach, which I can talk a little bit more about. But where are we today, 7.5 years down the road? We've impacted more than 12,000 young people, and we're positioned to impact another 2,000 this year.
Let's come back to that. Thank you very much. Tony.
Yeah.
I know a little bit about your start because I was around there. So share with us, what was the catalyst, man? What was the trigger?
I mean, the trigger for me was looking in the mirror, actually, and seeing a black boy that was probably a genius, yeah? Me. And so, in that sense...
You're the only person that has seen that.
Well, that's what my mother told me. And I think that what was... I think... let me tell you this one. I'm going to tell you why. I'm not going to tell you how, because you have to pay for that. But I'm going to tell you what as well. Why we did it was that I just didn't believe in this idea or notion that lots of black boys were underachieving because instinctively they were either thick or they just didn't want to do anything or they were just naturally aggressive. In fact, complete opposite. I thought they were, boys and girls, really kind of there to run things. They were there, they're super intelligent. And also, I do think we're in a society, I'll be very quick with this one, where if you're not, we tend to associate certain groups or certain people with certain things. So science, for example, science and technology was not on the radar for that group at all. So I went for the hardest task, and I said that I'd find some boys who were kind of had the potential to get to top universities, but were in poor performing schools. And we found those boys and we worked with them. And what we did, the trick really, this is a little bit on the how, but I'll let you have this for free. And that is that we decided that the program had to start when you were about 12 and end when you were about 25, which is about what we've got now. So I started with 10, just about got them all in the back of my car, that 10. You knew some of those because you came to the launch of it. All of those 10, bar one, he did all right. He had his problems, but I mean, he did all right. The problem is he went to LSE, and I wanted to do economics, and the rest of them went to Oxford, Cambridge, and UCL to do real science. So we'll let him off because he's come here. And at the time, I would have thought that there was no chance of any of that group getting anywhere, and I think we made the difference. So that's the key. And now we allowed the girls to come in, and that is important for us. They've taken the thing over. 60% girls now on our program, and I'm happy for that. I'm happy that girls are doing science, black girls are doing science, and we got about 500 kids on the program now. All going to top universities.
So 3 different catalyst triggers for getting themselves up to try and do the right thing. So share with us now, just to put a bit more complexion on this. In the time that you've been running, have you exploded any myths, and what are you learning? What's your learnings to date from your experiences?
Me or
can you kick off?
I suppose in terms of myths, one of the things is that what you've got to do with intelligent children, young people, is to give them the opportunities. It's all about the opportunities. It's all about the networking. It's all about who you know. It's all about giving them kind of that guideline through. And I think that but it can't be done you can't cheat this thing. So, for example, if you're talking about real development, then for those children, you have to start younger. I think you have to start when they're in secondary school, maybe even in primary school. You have to start, and you have to stick with them all the time. You have to be consistent. A lot of our boys felt that they didn't have a consistent thing in their lives. The dads were in and out, or there wasn't that kind of development. Their schools were either there or they were going to close down or whatever, So you have to provide that continuity. I think the other thing is you have to provide a challenge. Now, I'll be honest with you, our boys didn't have a holiday when they came on the program. I don't think they ever had. They were just doing science all the time, And it was a strange thing that you would want to not play football but do science. But that was what we gave them, and very difficult science as well. And so I suppose exploding the myths is that one of the myths is that this idea of difficulty, that in fact doing difficult things is actually a good thing. It's actually, and what we kind of got at the moment is a notion that you've got to make it easy. So I used to try and trip up my students all the time, deliberately, make it harder and harder. And I used to go to universities and say it's too easy, make it harder for them, So, for example, in our first year, I remember...
And received wisdom would say if you made it harder, they might withdraw. Is that what you found?
No, they want that. And one of the reasons why we have this issue with our young men being in gangs and etc. and all of these other things is that they're looking for challenge. This is against all this sort of postmodern stuff about gender fluidity, but I actually think that there is something about being a particular type of man, I suppose, but I think there is a specific about being territorial, about wanting competition, about wanting to actually go for something that has a prize, and failing and then going again at that. Now, maybe that's a cultural thing, I don't know, but that's what I think happened for us. And I think that if we don't keep that focus, it's not that you beat people up. It's not that you lose your feminine side, but you have to have that focus on challenge. Otherwise, they will drift in. They will find their own challenges, and there will be negative ones. Yeah.
So, in many respects, the challenges gave them something to belong to, focus, and it was consistent.
Yeah, I remember getting a group of. We went, and I always used to go to the hardest places. So, where was the hardest place? Imperial College. So let's roll up there. Yeah. So we went to Imperial with a group. There's me. I remember with a group of Pied Piper had a group of about 20 black boys, little black boys running around. And I know the lecturers wondering, what are these boys doing in the canteen with a little thing? And we went in the first lecture, and it was the first task. They were there for 4 weeks as well, so we're not going to just be there for a day. They were there for 4 weeks. And their task was to find a cure for malaria. And I remember they said, "Sir, I'm only 12." I said, "Just get on with it, yeah." And
just a sort of coaching support they need.
I don't really know. I just come from the hard. I was born in Brixton and raised by whatever, and that's how I do my teaching. Get on with it, yeah. Believe me, you're gonna find it, yeah. And they produced. I remember when we finished all that stuff with them, and they were producing. The lecturer said to me, first of all, that we think this is too hard. They haven't done enough maths. So I said, so Imperial at the time had the real people who were doing the research finding this cure. So I said, right, that's where black people are going to be. We want to be where we don't want to be on the outside doing it. We want to be where it is, right down in the cellars where you have all the nuclear stuff. That's where we want to be, right? So we went down there. And we put these boys with the real teams who were finding the cure. And they did posters and things like that. And then I got calls up. When we finished the whole thing, they called us, "Have you got any more of these boys? You got any more?" And of those Imperial boys that were the 26 of them were at Imperial doing the studying afterwards. Good. Yeah. Give me a round of applause. 6 of them. Right? Jesus. I mean, we're not talking about middle class kids here. We're talking about from New Cross, Lewisham. We're talking about Brixton, Haringey, tough areas. Yeah, I'm not talking about little middle class boys who have got some kind of thing in the background. I'm talking about first in their family to university. Yeah. So, challenge.
Very good. Dwain.
Our learning is slightly different, although where the overlap is, challenge matters. But here is how our learning came together. One of the first things we noticed about young people, mostly young men in our community, let's say they're under 19, is that when you have a conversation with them, which begins by saying, "What do you think people like us do in our society?" it doesn't take long for the conversation to come around to entertainment, as in music. It doesn't take long for the conversation to come to sport. And it doesn't take long for the conversation to distill into, if I'm not good enough to do either of those two things, then I'll have to do crime. And that is a consistent message that we hear from a lot of teenage young people, particularly our boys, and that is tragic. So one of the things that actually encouraged us to do what we're doing with all of the inspiration events that we do is we showcase the range of talent and achievement in our community to those young people. Because here is the metrics that we know because we've done the research. In terms of crime, in terms of sport, in terms of music, there is seldom more than about 10,000 who do that as their job, and I'm using job in the broadest sense, including those who are in prisons. Now that's about 30,000. But when you look at the size of the black community in the UK, we're not 30,000 people, we're 3 million and growing. So we're talking about no more than 1% of our population that's involved in those 3 areas, and only one of those 3 areas is unacceptable to me and possibly to all of us. So the question to the young people when we share those numbers is, what do you think the other 99% of us are doing? And that's when the penny begins to drop. We're teachers, we're workers in public sector, we're workers in private sector, we're parents, we're looking after our children, we're fully law-abiding, we're getting on with our lives. And when we share those points with those young men, usually they're shocked because they've not seen their community as normal. What they see is what the media project and what misguided people in our community say. That's all they can do, that's all they can be. So our learning is similar but different, and that is why we are passionate about showcasing professionals from our community, men and women, so that when those young people, 14 and
They use psychometric models for managers, you know, to help them find out who they are. We do that immediately with our students. So within the month of being on the program, they immediately describe themselves. They understand who they are. They understand their strengths, their weaknesses. They understand the opportunities that they could have if they behave in a different way. So our program is very much about working on the softer skills. It's about getting the students to understand how to use those skills, to understand how they can read people, to understand how, in certain situations, how they can behave to make the difference. And if you empower them and you give them that skill and that ability, the change immediately is massive. And then you add on to that all of the other development opportunities that are there for them. It means that when our student, and I will link with Reach Society, so I am very proud to say that if you go to the Reach Society Careers Fair, you can always identify an Amos Bursary student.
Can I jump in here? Because thank you for giving me that segue.
I'm not sure I said yes.
Yeah, he can tell it for me.
We do 10 Perfect 10 workshops, and we've always created one where the Amos Bursary boys get a chance to interact.
Very good.
It is our most popular workshop, and we've done that now for 4 or 5 years.
Right.
And imagine this scenario. You've got the public, mum, dad, boys and girls, and they sign up for 100 places on that workshop. And I almost want to ask Donald to stand up and say something about this for this reason. Donald facilitates that workshop, and Donald keeps telling me this, because I'm walking the floors. When those boys stand up and say, I'm John Smith, or I'm Tunde, and I'm studying medicine at LSE, or I'm studying biochemistry at Oxford, or I'm studying PPE at Cambridge, you can almost feel the pride rising in that room, because not one of those young men has gone to prison. Not one of those young men is destitute, and all of them are incredibly bright, and just as Colleen has said, self-assured. That is why we have them there, because they're living examples of what all of those talented youngsters can do.
Very good.
So, absolutely agree.
But I think it's important to add into that is that I don't want people to believe that those are young people that are any different from the students that Tony deals with. When you, a lot of the students write for us case studies about their experience and what their life has been like, and a number of them, they will say that if it had not been for the bursary, regardless of the fact that I'm bright, I see my friends who are now in prison, some of them for 24 years, and that could have been me.
Correct.
So we know that the program makes a really big difference for those young people. And so their environment has a big impact on them. When they leave the Amos Bursary, we have all of our sessions in Linklaters, or we'll go to BPP, or we'll go to other environments that take them away from where they come from. But they have to go back into their environments. They have all of the challenges that all of the other young men have. And I think for me, one of the things that we know about our students and our young men is the resilience that they have to overcome all of those challenges.
Knowing someone's in their corner.
Absolutely.
Which is important.
And the boys themselves
I think that's
describe
true,
it.
because I think if you were to look at what's created is also an alternative group, because I think that for many of our young men, especially, I remember in the early days, and we started to do this right from, well, you came in 2000, I won't give you your age really, 2002 or whatever, but it was a long time, and we were really on our own doing much of this, and I felt that when we created Generating Genius, one of the issues for some of the young men, remember these are 12, 13-year-olds, was that there was going to be a sense of the peer group pressure that was on them to sort of say, well, why? And some, I remember one boy said, I can't sign up, sir. But if I sign up, they know in my estate I'm going to sign up. They're going to beat me up. You know what I mean? That was a kind of challenge. So what you need to do is you need to create, and I think that's what we're all doing in different ways, kind of alternative communities where it's safe to be bright, where it's safe to actually say that, you know, I want to be a scientist. Because we kind of want, we have this sort of counter thing where people almost want to play down, you know, play down their brightness. You know, that's why we call it generating genius. And I often have a situation where students are doing very well, and yet they don't want to show that off. They want to hold back.
A stigma attached to achieving.
That's right. There's a kind
to
of
being
weird,
bright, to being intellectual.
kind of weird kind of thing going on there.
Yeah.
I want to come in on the back of that point, because that culture issue, that climate issue, is key.
Yes.
If we're in a community and we're connected to other parents and other families, if you have the insight and the desire, you can very quickly create that alternative environment. And I say that because we're actually engineering that more by accident than design within Reach Society. And what am I talking about? Every month we have a networking conversation, and it's on a drop-in basis for professionals who are interested in, one, getting to know more about the society, and two, getting to know other professionals. But after 7.5 years, this is what we're seeing. The hundreds of professionals who have dropped in are now friends with each other, and they're talking outside of the networking conversations, and they are doing stuff, and that creates an alternative, positive environment where professionals are comfortable with other professionals rather than running for the hills, and they're talking about family matters and business matters and so forth. So you're absolutely right. We've got to change the way we live, and if it is something that we want to be beneficial for our children, we've got to be proactive about creating it.
Very good.
Well, one of the things that the young men on the bursary say is they call themselves brothers, because they feel that they have another environment that they can come into where there are other like-minded young men, and that really matters to them. And I just want to share with you something that happened in July. So a young lady came to me. She'd attended Warwick University. She was still there. But they came and they spoke. She found that she was speaking to young men from the Amos Bursary, and she was just amazed in terms of who they were, how they operated. They were leading all of the societies at the university. They were talking about the experiences that they were having. And she just said, these young men are amazing, and I want to do a documentary on the students. And she's made a fantastic documentary called The Brotherhood. And it talks about the challenges the young men feel that they have and how they're overcoming it. And above all, they really absolutely believe that that sense of collegiateness that they have together is just so important. So for me, I think that that's exactly, so linking through, that's really what we provide for them. And for a young woman to recognise the importance of that, I think is really quite significant.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that we started off as a boys' program, and it was Google who came along and waved. I think it was at the time. I won't tell you right. It was 6 figures anyway, to tempt you out, like on a Facebook thing, to tempt us out to saying that, look, diversify the program, get girls on, and we'll fund you. And I kind of thought, well, should I take the money or not? And it was a kind of,
How long did you think for?
3 seconds. I took that money straight away. The thing is that the issue with, and it's quite interesting what you say, Colleen, because I think that one of the things about this notion of the brotherhood, when the girls came onto the program, I worried that I thought, well, okay, what's going to happen here? This notion of, you know, there was this neat little kind of group, band of brothers going around together doing science, and then along come their sisters. But actually, I think it's quite a positive thing that men now kind of link with the girls. because I don't kind of like the division anymore. I think that I thought it could work at one point. It was good, but seeing the girls crack the stereotype around technology, in particular. Like, for example, one of the problems I have continually with my girls is that they all want to be doctors. But I blame the parents half of the time, and I am continually pushing them towards what I call the crunchy sciences, the physics, the engineering, the technology, and there's one girl. She's now looks like she's going to be a fighter pilot with the RAF, and she came to me and she was telling me she wants to be some doctor. I said, I wouldn't want you anywhere near any patients anyway, you know. But
Just a sort of encouragement to me. There's a particular style to your coaching here, isn't there?
Well, I'm very direct, you know. They like me for that, you know. They say, Dr. Sewell, you're very, very direct, you know. I say, yeah, that's the way we should have it. Let's not mess around. And they like that. The kids like that honesty, you know what I mean? They don't want you to mess around. Just tell them as it is. And you know, the medicine isn't for you. And the reason why I knew that she wasn't a medicine, she fainted. We had this thing. We went to some hospital. We did some work experience, and what happens with brain surgeries, I know that's another thing you must know about, is that they do literally, I know in brain surgeries, you use the Black & Decker drill to get into to crack the skull. That's what it is one of those things, because that's the only way you can get in it. So our kids were around there watching this, and she was the one who fainted. So, but, you know, engineering, coding is for her. But what I'm getting back to is this idea of the boys and girls working together. And I think in our community, we've got to look at that and ask ourselves, I mean, it's a hard question, but for me, I'm happy that the girls are 60% in there. Yeah.
So look, I want to set up, before we take a break and come back and take the questions from the audience, look out a bit in the future for me. Let's dream a little. If resources wasn't an issue, and we went 5 years out, what would your respective organisations look like?
Yeah. We have a vision, and our vision will drive our behaviour. Our vision is to make it easy for young people to be inspired by our professionals. So for us, if we're going to make a difference in the UK, we need to be truly nationwide. We decided to start rolling out what we've been doing in London and the South East for the last 7 years outside of London. We piloted our first non-London event in Wolverhampton last month, and it was very successful. We have lots of local converts in the Midlands who want to now do more work with us. But we recognise that at least 50% of the black community lives outside of London. So all the urban areas that we know well, for us, are potential targets for us to have inspirational events, connecting with the local professionals, connecting with the local employers in order to inspire the young people to up their game.
Very clear. Colleen.
Yeah. So in terms of our vision, I think that if you look at London, at the moment our focus is very much on young black men. So there's a lot of discussion that's taking place around what a programme would look like for young women. But there's another issue which that hasn't really been discussed, which is young black men who attend independent schools. And I've been receiving a lot of calls and inquiries from parents who are very, very concerned about their young people and their social capital as a result of going to independent schools. So where they might be getting the education, what they're not getting is that understanding, that social understanding of themselves and their being. So for instance, I had a call just before I came here today from a mother whose son has spent all of his secondary at an independent school. His father, the parents are now separating. The father has now withdrawn the funding. So this young man has now found himself in a state school where he's struggling to adapt and to survive. On the other case, there are parents who know that they have sent their children to independent schools, and what they are finding is the children are not understanding the challenges that they are going to face as young black men when they leave those institutions.
Very good.
And the third thing are young people from independent schools who are there on scholarships. So it doesn't mean that they have the money, they don't have the finances. What it means for them is they will go to an independent school, receive the education, but they still don't have the networks and the social environment that they require to progress. So from a London perspective, those are areas and things that people have been coming to us to discuss as possibility. And then in terms of scaling up, again, we've been asked by other cities to introduce something like the bursary. So we know that there's plenty of scope for what we need to do. What we will not do is to expand at the expense of our brand. Because our excellence is the thing that has maintained the programme, and we will continue to make sure that excellence is at the heart of everything we do.
Very clear.
Well, I think for us, just to answer that one, we've managed to get the thing to the point where we've had something called Junior Genius, which is the younger ones, that's to GCSE. Then we've had something called the Uni Genius, which is just entry to university. It seems to me that what has happened now is our alumni who are at university or leaving have come back to us and said, wait a minute, the same issues that we were having, that you developed with us on the road to through the school and up into university, we almost need a Generating Genius program out on the campus itself. So what we're looking at, and we're talking to universities at the moment, is just to run the same thing from year 1 through to year 3 and outwards, where we have these key things about employability issues and about soft skills, but also I think that the key thing on the campus is the networking, and beginning to develop that. So, if anything, our development will be to sort of grow the program on the campus itself.
So 3 very different approaches to scaling. 3 very different organisations, each making a tangible difference. What I'd like you to think about in the break before we come back for questions, that these are relatively small initiatives, worthy of being a lot bigger. What can we do to support, to help, to enable them to do more? What can we as a community, what can we do as businesses, what we can do as individuals? As I said at the start of this, it's very rare we get the chance to have an informed discussion about this particular subject of disadvantage and maybe underperformance. What you've heard here is very clear direction, instruction, delivery, making a difference, but each one of them is slightly different. Every one of them could do with a little bit more support. Every one of them could do with a little bit more scale. All of them, what I've heard very clearly, is not at the detriment of what they've built already. Nothing is best done alone anymore. And one thing we do know is that we're stronger together. Join me in giving them a fantastic round of applause. Now, one of the things we're trying to get out of tonight, as you know, we're filming this, we're going to do the edited highlights, and what we want to do is, through the film we get, is to take it to a much broader audience. We're streaming live on Facebook tonight for those, our friends and our members of our network who couldn't make it here. And they're streaming globally. We've got friends across Africa who are really interested because they have similar challenges. So we'd like you to do at the break, we'd like your views on what you've heard so far. My team will be coming round and do a quick videotape. We're looking for testimonials. We're looking for people who are interested. Because remember, what we want to end up with is we've got a live audience, a well-informed audience, a well-informed panel, and we'd like the edited highlights to go out to everyone who couldn't be here today. Thank you for coming. Join us for some drinks. We're going to take a 20-minute break and we'll come back with your questions for the panel. Thank you very much indeed.